All right. Hi guys. A very good evening. If you're able to see me, hear me, and see the screen properly, send a hi, good evening, something in the chat so that I know the setup is fine and we can get started. Perfect. I hope everybody is doing well. Really sorry about the last session. I had to rush to the hospital. There was some family emergency, so we could not have the session. But no worries, we'll catch up with what we were supposed to do. So we are continuing from there, right? So yes, we will make the to-do list bit in this session. So the agenda of the session overall is to quickly revisit what we have discussed in JavaScript and then add a little more HTML, CSS to it. So with that, we'll finish up event handling, working with forms, and a couple of other things. So primarily, a lot of front-end interactivity is what we are going to discuss today. And you need to pay very close attention to today's session because this is where your assignment will be based on, right? So based on what we make today, a to-do list kind of a thing, something similar is what you will get in your assignment as well, right? So pay really close attention to how we build the code and how we structure it so that you'll be able to do the assignment easily as well, right? But before we start with that, again, I have a couple of quick puzzles for you. So I'll show them to you one by one. You can answer on the screen, and then I'll give you a minute or two to put your answers in the chat. Then we'll discuss the solution and move to the next one. So here's the first one. Take a minute, think about it, put it in the put your answers in the chat, and then let's discuss what the correct answer is. Already perfect. So yes, a clock is the correct answer. I'm sure there could be other, maybe some other answers as well. But what I have in mind with respect to this one is a clock. So a clock has a face, but I mean, you can see the face of the clock, but there are no eyes. And hands, of course, we have the minute hand, the hour hand, and the seconds hand, but no fingers. So clock is the correct answer. There could be other things that fit the criteria, but as of now, we'll go with clock. Most of the other answers that are in the chat are not true. Computer, again, how does the computer have a hand? Same with a keyboard. So these were some of the other answers which are not the correct answer. Clock is the correct one. Perfect. Here's the next one. So again, take a minute, read this carefully, and put your answers in the chat. Okay, so the correct answer here is darkness, technically. So it could also be sight or eyesight or vision, anything synonymous to that. But yes, darkness is ideally what I'm looking at. So the more darker it is, I mean, the darker it is, the less we can see. Right? So darkness, sight, vision, anything around those terms is what the correct answer is. Perfect. Here's the last one for today. Again, this is a little longer, but take a minute, think about it, and then put your answers in the chat. All right, perfect. So a lot of you did get this right as well. So the correct answer is photography or photographer rather. So a person A shoots person B in the sense that they take a photo of the person, and we're talking about the old style photography where you had to shoot on film, and then that film had to be put underwater and dried for it to reflect, like show the photo, right? So kind of what we get with those what do we call it, the portrait cameras, right, today. So yes, a person A shoots person B in the sense that they are a photographer and they are taking a picture of person B. Perfect, well done you guys. So most of you did get all of these correct, so well done with that. Again, I'll keep coming up with more of these in every session, and like I said, they will get more technical and more difficult over time. So yes, let's get to the agenda for the session now. So what we're trying to do in this session, primarily, I'll just show you on the screen in just a minute, is the intention is to build something like this. Right now, we're not going to have enough time to build every single, like, we are not going to have enough time to build it exactly like what it is. But there are a couple of key concepts that we have to discuss in order to make this work. And that is basically a list based mini, you can think of it like a mini project that we're trying to build today. So this is sort of putting everything together, putting everything together in terms of whatever we have covered so far. So here is what we are looking at, right? So there is my screen. Here is what we are looking to build. Now we know how to do some of this. For example, we know how to dynamically create elements in JavaScript. We have discussed that with the document object model in the previous session. We also know how to read elements from the screen. So we know that if there is an input field and we want to read it in JavaScript, we can do that. What we don't know is two things. Number one, how do we store this data, like store more than one note or more than one item? And number two, how do we detect user events? So these are two things that we'll try to cover. And then in the second half today, we'll also spend a little more time on CSS as well to arrange things and understand how CSS works in more detail. So this will be a combination session of, say, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And we are trying to discuss some front-end functionality today, right? And then in the next couple of sessions, we'll move to the backend side of things, and then we'll put it all together at the end. So once we know how to read input from the user, once we know how to temporarily store it temporarily, we will then discuss how to actually send it to the backend and how to permanently store it. Once that is done, then we'll come back, and in the last 3 sessions or so, we'll try to build an entire project, the Goodreads app that we have discussed, by putting everything together. Okay, so that's going to be the setup. So today we are going to cover JavaScript and CSS. If you're looking for the specific topic, then this is going to be, adding, you can call it event handling or whatever, something like that. But yes, so we are still covering JavaScript and CSS. So this is a part of document object manipulation where we are making it a little more dynamic, a little more interactive, where the user can enter something and things will change on the screen according to it. Right. So yes, let's go to VS Code and I'll show you a couple of quick examples first, and then we'll get to this. So if you remember in the previous session, we have already discussed two very important things. One, we have talked about how to create new elements in JavaScript. So again, we have seen how to make this with the help of document.createElement. And then we have seen how to connect it or how to display it with the help of append child, right? So we have already discussed that. And we have also seen how to delete elements on the screen from by using remove child. And we've also seen how to read something that is already there on the screen. So for this, we have discussed three different ways of reading it. We can read element by ID. We can get elements by class name. We can get elements by tag name, right? So we have a couple of different ways to do it. And I've also shown you how to set attributes, etc. Right? So we have seen how to set attribute, read an attribute, all of that. So we are going to still work with the same setup. There are a couple of new things to discuss, but the setup is still going to be the same. First of all, we will create a form field so that the user can type something in. Then we'll create a button for them to click. And once they click the button, something will happen in JavaScript. Some functionality will happen in JavaScript. So first we'll build the functionality part out, and then we'll spend some time styling things or with CSS to sort of again try to match the output in terms of the display as well. But first of all, let us start with the functionality, right? So the first question to you is, we want to create this form field that you see here. So what is the tag? What is the HTML tag that I should be using? So I'm going to comment out everything that is already there and start with a clean file. So I'll keep the existing code just in case you want to refer to it, but still I'll comment everything out, and let me also go ahead and open this with live server. So we'll actually see the output as well. And just give me one more minute. Just want to, okay, there we go. And I just want to make a copy of this so it's easier for me to upload it for you. Just give me 1 minute and so don't worry about the session numbering and all. That is for us to figure out because I know we did not have the last session. So don't worry about it. We'll cover it later. Like we'll add more session at the end of it. But for our numbering sake, for our messaging sake, we are on session 6, even though we technically did not have session 5. But again, don't worry about that. That's an internal thing for us to worry about. And yes, so now I will just delete everything that we don't need. There you go. And yes, so again, I'm waiting for your response in the chat. What is the tag that we use to create that form field from where we can take input from the user? Let me know in the chat. So I'll then go ahead and create it. So I've just deleted all the code in all the places. So we can start with a blank file. And of course, I'll give you all the code towards the end. So yes, we have a form tag, perfect. And we don't need any action for now. How about the next bit? So how do we create that field where you can type something? Input, right? So we have inside the form, there is a tag called input. Again, for people who are new to HTML, this is basic HTML where we have the form tag, opening, closing. So this creates the form. And then we have several inputs inside of the form. So these input types will decide what kind of input the user can give us. So for example, if you want a normal text input, then we say type equal to text. Now, if I go ahead and open it up, so there we go. So once we open it up, you can see we get a text box on the screen and I can actually type something in. So this is your input type text. If we change any of that, like if we change it to, let's say, number, for example, so then you will see we get these arrows as well, which help us add or remove like plus minus one in terms of number. So that's what we get if we use the type number. And just like this, once we change the type, the corresponding input will change. As you can see, if I put type is equal to date, then we get the date picker over here. So just like this, we have about a dozen different input types. We have, value. I think it's called range. So this gives us a range like this, right? So this is another input type, etc., etc. But for now, we are looking at a normal text input. So I'm going for text. Now within this, we can also have another attribute called a placeholder. So placeholder is the dummy text or the container text that shows up. All right. So for example, in our case, this what are your tasks for today? This is our placeholder. So I can just type that in. So what are your tasks for today? Question mark. That becomes our placeholder. And it will show up in the input, right, for now. And again, we are not worried about the styling just yet. It is not fitting the input, but that's fine. We'll worry about that with CSS. So that input is done. Now, in order to read this input in our JavaScript, we need to give it an ID. So let's call it task. um, let's say just keep it to task, right? And then to create that button, so you see we have this add button, which the user can click on. So to create this add button, we have two possibilities. We can make a normal button tag, which is an HTML button. So we can just say add. This will work. So as long as you have a button within a form, it will work as a submit button. So that's one way to go about it. Or we can go for input type equal to submit. So technically speaking, a type submit is the better way to do it because it is a reserved setup. So the browser will know that this button is going to submit this form. If you want multiple buttons in the form, then you can create several buttons with a button tag, right? And to change the value, we have the value attribute, and this will become add, for example. Right? So this is our basic display for now. We have created a input field and we have a button. Now, when I click the button, you will see that the page will reload. Right now, if I just click on the button, you can see the page reloads. This is the default behavior of HTML. So every time we submit a form, it will try to reload the page. To prevent this reload from happening, what we need to do is we need to detect the submit event. We need to detect the submit event, and then we need to tell the browser, please don't do anything when the form gets submitted. For this, we can target the on submit event of the form. And on this on submit, we can get the event attributes. And then, hold on. Right. So this is let me first explain to you what is going on and then I'll type it. So basically what is happening here is we have the form, right? And what we want to do is we want to stop this default behavior. The default behavior of the form on submission is that it will send data to the backend and reload the page. That's how HTML works by default. We want to control that. So what we can do is we can tell HTML to behave differently. So what we can do is we can say on submit, and on submit, we want you to do something particular. Right? So we can provide that as a function, HTML. Right? We can provide rather a JavaScript function can be provided to HTML. So you can either define it directly in line over here, right? So we can say on submit, and then we want to basically perform this task, right? This is going to be our function that needs to be triggered on submit. So that's what we can write. So we can say take the event that you get, and then we say e dot prevent default. So this will mean that prevent default basically indicates that we don't want you to perform the default event, default task. What we also do, what is a better approach here is to define this functionality in a different file so that again we achieve our separation of concerns. We don't want to write all the code in one place. We want to spread it out as much as possible because again, typically if you are a developer, you would either work on the HTML or the CSS or the JavaScript. It is very unlikely that you will do all three, right? So what we can do is we can move that to another file. Now over here, what we can do is we can say handle submit is equal to, and here we can create that arrow function. This is a function is basically a piece of code which we can call whenever we need. So we can read the event as an input, and we can say event the default behavior of that event. Now, what event are we reading here? We are reading the submit event. How do we know this? Because this handle submit is going to be called only on submit. So we are telling our browser that we want you to call handle submit once you submit it, once the form is submitted. For our understanding, what we can do is we can also say console.log submitted, just so that we can see this message, just to see what is going on, right? So let me pull up the console first of all, and then I'm going to click on the button. Now, as soon as I click on the button, you will see nothing is happening. It is still doing the default behavior, which means something is still off. It's something that we have written in our code is still off. And that has got to do with this part of the code. Right? So over here, if you see, we are getting some issues and it is basically not invoking the function. So for that, we can go ahead and call the function. This is the function call. Let's see, let's try this again. So now when I click on add again, the same thing is happening, which means something is still off over here. Now, does anybody know where to go? What are your options when you are stuck writing some code? Let us say that you're stuck with this code and you don't know what to do. So do you know any resources for this? Can you tell me in the chat, do you know some resources for it? Right. So we have a couple different options, right? First up, we can remove the action. That is fine. It will still not fix it. As you can see, it is still giving us some error, but at least it is not reloading the page. Okay, so that is one fix, right? But more importantly, that is because of this. So once I remove that, now it should be fine. And we should hopefully see it working. But anyway, coming back to my point here, the point is that there are a couple of different ways to fix errors as well. And it's really important for you to know where you can go and how you can fix it. The most obvious way, obviously, is to take the error or take the situation and Google it. Right? So you can type it on Google, getting on submit error, on submit not working, whatever your error is, you can just, go ahead and you can type it out. And over there, you will find 2, 3 different places. The first platform is Stack Overflow. Right. So now if I just submit it, let us say we're getting this error. So what I can do is I can just copy this line, type error, this, and I can just Google it. Now, as soon as I Google it, you will see two different like resources. The first resource is going to be Stack Overflow. You can check it out, and this will probably give you the solution most likely, right? So syntax error, you have to pass event. That is probably our issue as well. We did not pass the event over there. And the second link that you will get will be from GitHub. Right? So these are two really good platforms where a lot of developers help each other out. Right? So they don't get anything from it. These are people who are just struggling and trying to help others. So similarly, you can also try and help other people if you want, right? By trying to. So we can pass in the event as the argument, and then hopefully this will fix it. You can see now this is fixed. So immediately within 1 minute, I searched for it. I opened the first link and I got my answer. So this is how you will have to do most of your work in the company as well, right? Because nobody is going to sit with you and handhold you throughout. They'll give you some knowledge transfer, some KT, some session to help you understand the system. But that is how it is going to be, right? So I'm just preparing you for the same. Perfect. Now we are done with this part. So this is our event handling. Right? This on submit that I've written here is an event that the user can trigger. What I have for you is a quick challenge now. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a heading here. So H2, and this is going to be our create your to-do list. Let's go for H1. Okay, so H1, create your to-do list. What I want you to do is, so this is the only code that you need from here. Everything else you don't really need. What I want you to do is, I want you to create a functionality where when somebody hovers on the heading, the background color will change. Right? Listen very carefully. What I want you to do is I want you to create a function or create some logic in JavaScript where when I hover over my heading, let's say I'm take the mouse over this heading, create your to-do list. So as soon as my mouse gets over this heading, its background color should change. Okay. So again, I'll give you some 5 minutes for this. I want you to write some logic where as soon as I take my mouse over the heading, when I take over or mouse over, when I take my mouse over the heading, the background color should change, right? So have you understood what you need to do? Send a yes in the chat if it is clear what needs to be done. This is not to be done with CSS. You have to do it with JavaScript. So I don't want to see any CSS code. With CSS, it's very simple. It's this. I'll show you. If you are working with CSS, it's this simple. That's it. This is the code. Okay, if I do this now, if I I haven't linked to the CSS file, I guess. Okay. This is basically it in terms of success. I'm not sure why it's not working, but this is basically how it is in CSS. Let me quickly try this out. Just try to put a normal color. So yeah, it is there fine. And I think it's because of this one. Yeah, definitely. So that's it. That's what we're looking at with CSS. But I want you to do this in JavaScript. So I'm looking at a JavaScript solution for this, where first of all, obviously, you'll have to read the heading from the page, then somehow detect when the mouse is coming over the heading. And when that is happening, a background color change should be triggered. So this needs to be done with JavaScript, not like this. This is very simple, I know, but you have to do it with JavaScript. Okay. So I'll give you 5 minutes. It's 5:30 right now. I'll give you 5 minutes. Okay. In exactly 5 minutes, I'll come back and I'll show you the solution. So try to do this on your own. Again, you can Google for it, look at some other resources. Everything is fine. As long as you don't use ChatGPT, I am good with it because that will just give you the code and that's not the best way. So I would recommend you Google it, try it out, refer to MDA and check out the documentation. Spend a couple of minutes on it and try to get it done. Once I come back in 5 minutes, I'll show you how to do it as well. So go ahead, try to work on this. Whenever you hover over the heading, the background color should change and you have to achieve it with JavaScript. I have put all the relevant code that you need on the screen as well. So let's come back in 5 minutes and continue. But make sure you try to do this. Just put a done, ready, yes, something in the chat if you have it already, like if you have done, whenever you're done with it. Okay, so let's see if you're able to do it. If you were able to finish it off, you can put your code in the chat now. So let's see how many of you got it done, and then I'll also quickly show you how to do it. Okay. So again, I am pretty sure everybody who has put the code in the chat so far has already known what JavaScript is, because none of you have used the approach that is right in front of you on the screen. We have not talked about adding event listeners yet. We have not talked about that part. So most of the code in the chat is just add event listener, but we don't really need that, right? So what we really need is exactly what I've shown you here. So just like we have an on submit event, in the exact same way, we have an event called on mouse over, right? On mouse over. So we can just write the logic over here, or we could also make it in a different file. So let's say change bg. This could be our function. And what we can do is we can assign it, right? And then over here, we can say read the event. And to access the element which has triggered the event, we have something called e.target. Okay, so we can say e.target dot and then style. So e.target will be h1. So e.target dot style dot background color is equal to, say, pink, for example. So this is, hopefully this will fix it. Otherwise, we can always go back and look at it. And then we just have to connect this event. So we can say change BG, and then we want to pass the event like so. So again, this is exactly the same thing that we had done. Just like on submit, we had called the handler by passing the event. So in the same way, we are doing it here also. It's a good convention to use the handle term. So I usually use handle everywhere wherever they are being called on an event. So now let us see what happens. So when I take my cursor over it, you can see it changes to pink. This is exactly what I wanted. This is not coming from CSS. And how do we know this? Because if we kept the CSS code, then it will also remove the hover when the mouse leaves, right? So it will only hover until and unless the mouse is there. I'll show it to you. So this is our CSS. I am just commenting the event part for now. So we only have CSS enabled. So in CSS, it will behave like this. It will hover, but then it will also go back to white. The background will go back to its default value once the mouse leaves. But if you do it properly with JavaScript, then it will stay pink throughout. It will not go back to its initial state. So if I check this now, or if I do this now with my JavaScript code enabled, you can now see that it will stay pink until the page is refreshed. It is not going back to white when the hover is gone. Why? Because for that, there is another event, right? So we can write another function. Let's say handle reset BG, and this needs to be called on the on mouse leave or on mouse exit event. So just like this, we can call the transparent background. It's called transparent. That's the default value, which means no background. You can also use white if you want to. And then instead of on mouse over, we can call this on mouse leave. On mouse leave. So we can call this function and again pass in event. So now what happens is this will start behaving like it does with CSS. As you can see, it will only stay hover as long as my cursor is on the heading. So we have to create custom event. This is how we can create custom events. So we are handling the existing events, but we are adding custom functionality to them. Okay. So does this make sense now? Is it clear? Just let me know in the chat if it is making sense to you, and then we'll move to the next part. So exactly, Mahesh, that is why I told you. So that is why I asked you the question, where do you go to look at documentation? Where do you go to look at errors? I already talked about that first, and then I showed you the solution, right? So that's the idea. Sure, let me just show this once more. So this is why I'm taking, small examples before creating that entire project, because I know that we haven't covered the basics and these are the basics. So I'm telling you everything from scratch. I'm telling you that there is this element that is available in HTML, H1. And on this element or on every single HTML element, we have so many different events that can be performed. Now, the event that we are looking for specifically is when mouse will be on the element. So for that, we have on mouse over. This would mean when the mouse enters or is over the element. And then we can create custom logic. What do we want to happen? So we can either write it directly as an arrow function right here. So we can say get the event and then, e dot target dot style, the same thing dot background color is equal to, and we can change it to pink. This should also work fine. But it is again, it is recommended that instead of messing up the code here, it is better to separate it in a different file. So we can say handle change bg. Again, you can call it whatever you want, and then we can paste the rest of it. So it's exactly the same thing. And then we can call it and pass the event. So to pass the event, we can do it like this, and that's it. So now you can see, uh, let's check what is happening here. Spelling mistake. Yes, the D is missing. So there's a spelling mistake there. And that should fix it. You can see now, as soon as you take my mouse over there, it will change the color. Right. So again, this is the setup. So first of all, we have to do 3 steps here. Step 1, we have to detect or decide which action the user needs to perform to trigger our function. Step 2, we have to define the function logic. And then step 3, we have to connect that function to the event. That's it. These 3 steps are required to do this. So now the next task that we have is to actually work the same thing. E is not, no, you can call it whatever you want. This can be anything. You can call it click, hover. It's a user defined value. So E is short for event. That's why we use an E, but it is no compulsion as such. You can call it whatever you want. Right? So yes, then E dot target is basically pointing to the element. So we want to change the background color of this heading. How do we tell this to the browser? We tell the browser that whichever element triggered the event, that's the target, right? So that is H1. So E dot target basically means H1 dot style dot color. So remember when we are creating a new element with JavaScript, we say const my heading equal to document dot create element H1, and then we say H1 like my heading dot style dot background. So in the exact same way, this is E dot target. We'll take another example so it will become more clearer. Now, you have to tell me what to do. So we have the input field here. And what we want to do is we want to read the value from this input. We have to read the value from this input when the form is getting submitted. So step 1, we have to detect which event, which we have already done. We have detected that on submit event is what we need to target. Step 2, we have to define the functionality. So that is pending. And step 3 is completed. We have already attached the function to the event. Now we have to work with this logic. So let me close this off. We have to work with this logic and let me write it down step by step for you. So first up, what we are doing is we are telling the browser, don't perform any default tasks. Okay? So when the event is happening, we are telling the browser prevent default. The default behavior of a form when anybody clicks on the submit button in HTML is to reload the page. Ideally, it is to send the data. First of all, send the data to the backend and then reload the page. That's the default behavior. And in our case, we don't want that. We want the data to be visible on the screen because there is no database. So we don't want that to happen. So that is why we are saying E, which is the current event. When that event happens, don't perform any default behavior, which means I will tell you what to do manually. I will tell you what to do. Please follow that. Don't follow any default behavior. Now, the next step here is for us to detect the input field Okay, so we have to somehow detect that there is an input field on the page. Once we do that, we can read the value entered by the user. And then the third step for now is to display the value in the console. So these are the three steps that we have to perform. So can you help me out with the first step? What code should I write? Which function can we use to detect the input field? I'll also show you the HTML code so that it will be easier for you to figure out. So here is our HTML code, right? And we can do it in 3-4 different ways. We have seen 3 ways already. We want to detect an existing element on the screen. So how can we detect that? That is your question. What I will do is to make it very simple for you, I will add an ID to it. Okay, not this one, my bad. The ID is already added, as you can see here. So we want to read this field, this input field, we just type text. So we have already added our ID here. So what code should I write so that we can basically understand or read the input from, like, detect that there is an input field. Remember in the previous session, we have already done this. We were able to get the list items from the screen. So what are the different functions available for this? Get element by ID. Perfect. So again, we have seen 3 functions. We have also recapped them before this session. We have get element by ID. We have get elements by tag name, and we have get elements by class name. There is also another method called query selector, which works with CSS. So I'll tell you more about that in the second half once we discuss CSS, right? For now, what we have to do is we can say variable. So I'm creating a variable. Let's say my input or task input. Again, you can call it whatever you like, is equal to document dot get element by ID. There is already an ID called task, which is available. So if I try to print this, if I say console.log task input, this will give us access to the input field or the input tag, the entire input tag, not the value the user is entering, the input tag, right? So if I just open up the console quickly and I click on the add button, now you can see our input field shows up. Now on this input field, we have a type attribute, we have an ID attribute, we have a placeholder, but we don't really have any value. Let us put something in, let us say first, and I will add it again. Again, you can see we don't have any direct access to that. So in HTML, to access any input field value, we have something called value. So we can say variable user input is equal to task input dot value. Task input dot value. This value is available only on input fields. Okay. So since this is an input field, we can access or extract the content that the user has entered using this value. Now we can try to print it. So I will replace task input with user input. Let us say hello and add. So we get the content. As you can see, we get hello, which is perfect. Now, the next step, if you see, if I go back to my steps here, so first stop, we have read the input field, detected the input field, then we have read the value entered by the user, and then we have displayed it in the console. Is it clear so far? Is it making sense so far? I'm showing you everything step by step very slowly. So let me know in the chat if it makes sense. Just put a yes, clear, understood, something in the chat so I know it's good and we can continue. Right? So we have done 3 simple steps. Step 1, we have detected the input field. Step 2, we have extracted the value from it. Step 3, we are displaying it in the console. That's it. Now, what is the last step? Well, the last step for us is to go ahead and print that value back on the screen, right? Very simple. We want to take the task that the user is giving and we want to print it on the screen. Now, how do we do this? Well, for that, we need 2 things. Number 1, we want some placeholder on the screen where we can show the list. So we can create that. Right? After the form, under the form, we can create an unordered list. This can contain list items. Now these list items need to be generated by JavaScript, right? Because it's dynamic. Right now we can just have an empty list. So we can say ULID is equal to task list. Okay. We can have an ordered list if you want, no worries. So that's up to us. We can just change UL to OL to make it an ordered list. So we have given an idea of task list. Now, what we want to do is, as soon as we get access to the content, we want to create a new list item and we want to append it to that list, right? We already have the list available with us. So let's quickly read that first. So we can say task list is equal to document dot get element by ID. The same way, pass in task list. This is going to get the UL for us. This will give us the UL. Now, every time we have a new item, we want to create a new list item. Can you tell me what function did we use to create this? We have done this so many times in the previous session. Which function did we use to create which function can we use to create a new list item in JavaScript? So we can say variable new item is equal to document dot create element. Right? We've already seen this create element. That this is going to be list item. Li is the list item. Now, once we have the new element created, we can say new item dot inner HTML is equal to the content that we have received. Right? So we can actually put it as a paragraph. Right? So it can be a paragraph and then our user input, we can say plus user input and then close the paragraph. So this is our a dynamic paragraph which is getting created every time the user is entering something. So we are creating a list item which contains a paragraph with the user's context. This is dynamic, which means every time you click on the add button, this function will be called. Every time we will read the user input and every time we will create a new list item. Now, what do we do finally? We want to take the list item and attach it, append it to the list. Again, very simple. We have the list with us. Task list dot, which function will we use to attach this list, like to put the list item within our ordered list? Append child. Perfect. So we can say append child and then new item. That's it. We are done, right? If I go back now, you can see our list will start working properly. So let us say first, let's say by eggs, for example, add. You can see as soon as I click on the add button, this will show up. Let's add something else. Let us say cook food. Add. As soon as I click on the add button, it gets added on the screen. Then let us take another one. Let's say study. Add. This gets updated as well. So this is the dynamic interaction that we are talking about. We are able to dynamically modify the content on the screen by reading the data from the user. Whenever you like a post, it turns blue. If you heart something, it turns red. If you write a comment, it shows up under the other comments. This is how that happens, right? Of course, it is also sent to the database. We will do that as well. But on the screen, this is how it works. So first we detect the action the user is performing. Then we get all the values that are a part of that action. And then we reflect the changes that we want to show, right? Now, the challenge for you is, how do I make this value empty every time? Right now, you can see when I add something to it, let's say, teach, and I click on the add button, it gets added here, which is perfect, but it still stays in this input field, which is weird. The user will not like it. They would want it to reset. So what can we do? Again, I'll give you 2 minutes for this. What can we do to reset the input field after we click the add button? So after we are done with our entire logic, what can we do here? What code can we write? It will be single line, one line of code. What can we write so that the input field is reset? I'll give you 2 minutes. Think about it and put your answers in the chat. Okay, perfect. So there are a couple of different answers. Let us go ahead and try this out. So none of the direct reset will work. We don't want that to happen. But yes, there is a way to reset the form. It's form.reset. But we don't really like, just like we have a submit button on the form, we also have input type reset available. But again, we don't want this to happen on a user click. We want to automate that, right? So there are two, three different responses in the chat. Let me show you. Let's try out one by one. So first response is user input dot the user input is equal to empty. This is one response. So let's see. Okay, let me first ask you this. So how many of you think that this is going to work? Just put a yes in the chat if you think that this will work, and a no if you think it will not. But I just want to see the count once. Hmm. Interesting. So a couple of people are saying yes. Most of you are saying no. Let's check. So now let us add a task and add it. And you can see it is not working. And the reason is because user input is not HTML. User input does not exist on the HTML page. User input is a variable that we have created only in JavaScript. So when we modify the user input, it is basically just within our logic. It has got nothing to do with the output. Okay. Because task input is the element. See, document.get element by ID is stored in task input. User input is not storing any HTML element. So if we modify anything like that, like if we modify this, nothing is changing in HTML. Okay. So even if you say user input dot value, there is nothing like that. User input itself is the value. So this does not exist. If I try to change it, you will get an, like if I try to change something like this, for example, you can see it is not resetting, still the same, right? So because again, there is nothing like this. User input does not have any field called value. This is not going to work. What is going to work is task input, maybe task input dot value. This is another suggestion in the chat. Let's see. So task input dot value, let's say first add it, and this will work. Why? Because task input is the actual element, right? Task input is storing the actual element. So when we modify the task inputs value, it is going to modify the element's actual value. And that is why it will work. So you have to be very careful when you use these variables, right? So user input only exists in the JavaScript context. It is not there in HTML because the element is not stored in user input. It is actually stored in task input. So if we have to change anything with respect to the element, it has to be done for the task input. Okay, perfect. We can also do this. So if you are very unsure or if you have no idea what to do, you can repeat the whole thing. You can just say document dot get element by ID, task input, right? Rather task, and then dot inner HTML is equal to empty. This will also be fine. So now again, if I try something out and it is not resetting because this needs to be value and not inner HTML, but we can change it that way as well. You can see now it's reset. So if you're not sure where the value is stored and don't know how to do it, then you can read the element again. It's fine, no problem. But this entire step, this is already done here. Task input is nothing but that code itself. So we can just replace that over here and this should be fine. Okay. So now this works well. We can, this is the first one, let's say cook is the second one. It's resetting now, which is perfect. So this is the first part that we had to build. Again, we will work on the editing, deleting parts later. For now, we are just focusing on creation, right? So we will work on edit, delete, all of that one by one. So is this clear? Does this make sense? Any doubts, any questions till this? Let's clear those and then we'll move to CSS. It's very, very important. One of the most fundamental things you will do every single time you build anything with HTML and JavaScript. Okay, all right. I'll quickly walk you through the code once again. and then we'll move to CSS. Again, I will send you the code as soon as the session is done. I will add it in the GitHub repository itself. Okay. So first, let's start with our HTML. In the HTML, again, we can forget the heading. This is our form. Okay. And whatever value we are reading from the form, we have created an empty list where we want to display that data, right? So in the form, we have two things, two input fields. The first input field is where the user is entering the data. The second input field is a submit button. Now, the logic is completely separated from the HTML file, right? There is no logic in the HTML file. It is all in the scripts file. This is called separation of concerns. We are separating the programming logic from our display, right? HTML is only the display and all the logic is happening in another file. Over here, the connection is done with the help of these functions. So we are connecting the handle change function here and handle submit function here. Now, where are these functions defined? Well, they are defined in another file, which is scripts.js, right? So in this scripts.js file, what we are doing is, first of all, we are reading the empty task list. That is our ordered list, right? This one. We are simply reading it because we want to add items to it. Then we are first telling the browser when the form gets submitted, whenever the user clicks on the add button or presses the enter key, in both cases, the form will get submitted. We want you to prevent default behavior, which is please don't connect to the backend. Please don't reload the page. This line of code will tell the browser to do nothing. It will tell the browser to wait for our instructions. Now, what instructions are we giving? Well, the first thing that we're telling the browser is to read this element called task. This is an input field. Since we know it is an input field, we can use the dot value to extract the value from it. So user input is the input field dot value. This will go to the input field, extract the text that the user has entered and give it to us. That is being stored in a variable called user input. We don't really have to display it in the console. That is just for our understanding. Now, once we have the data from the user, where do we want to keep it? Well, we want to create a new list item and show it on the screen. So we are creating a new item with create element. Then we are adding the user input to it. And then we are displaying it on the screen. To display it, we are saying task list.append child. So this will create the list item. It will be added to the ordered list. And once that is done, we are resetting the value in the input field so that the user can enter it again. Right? That is the setup. The screen is visible, Raj. I am sharing it again, but it is visible because I can see that my screen is being shared. So please check your connection. It could be a problem on your end. Right? So this is the setup and this is what we have done so far. I hope everybody has understood it and it makes sense. Right? So it's very logical, very step by step. And I have told you everything in detail. Right? I have explained it in very detail and I have tried to, again, give you multiple examples. So first example we saw for that heading background change. Second example we saw to read the value. And third example, third step was to create the output. So now once I type something in and I click on the add button, the on submit event will be triggered. The function will be called, handle submit function will be called, and it will create a new list. It will first extract the value from the text input, create a new list item, add it to the list, and then reset my field. And I can, let's say, type the second task again. It will repeat the same thing. But since there is already one item in the list, this one will be the second number item. So we get number 2. That's how ordered list will work. If you change OL to UL, you will get bullets, unordered, bulleted list, right? So this is our setup. Okay, perfect. Now, the next thing that I want to discuss in the next half an hour or so is a little to do with CSS. So we have not really, so whatever we do in JavaScript is temporary, which means it will only stay until we refresh. As soon as we reload the page, everything is gone, right? That is why we will discuss the backend and database later, where we can store data permanently. So then what will happen is every time the user opens up your application, we will fetch data from the database and it will be permanent storage. This is temporary storage. On every reload, the data will be lost, right? Because we are not storing it anywhere. It exists only until the page is active. As soon as we reload it or close it, the data is gone, which is why we have database. So we'll get to that later. Perfect. Now, like I was saying, we will quickly discuss a little bit of CSS now. And to do this, I will first quickly recap the selectors that we have already seen in a previous session. So if you remember, I told you about 4 different selectors. Can you recall them quickly in the chat for me? What were the 4 different selectors that I told you about? Perfect. So we have the ID selector, we have the tag select, we have the class selector, and we have the element selector. And there is something called the global selector or the universal selector. Okay, these are the 4 standard selectors. So the universal selector looks like this. It's star. This means everything on the page will be affected by it. We typically use it if you want to use a common fault all across the page, or you want to reset all paddings and margins to 0. So for all of those cases, we use it. So we can set margin 0. You can see now everything is pushed to the corners. If I just refresh or reset it, this is the default arrangement. There is some space on the left, some space on the top. Excuse me, some space between elements. If we change it to 0, then everything will shrink. Basically, there'll be no space between items. So for those use cases, we use this global / universal selector. So this is the first value. Again, we also use it for font changes. So to change the font, we have a style called font family. And then we can specify whatever font we want. Right. So let's go for this one. And if you check now, the font is different. If I we don't need any of this, just the name of the font will do. So if I comment it out, this is the default font. This is Times New Roman, which is the default font. But if I enable a custom font, then you can see it will change the font. So for these kind of use cases, we use the global selector. Okay. Then the next selector that we have is element selector. We also call it tag selector. So basically, every HTML element is a selector by itself or is a selector in itself. Right? So if I put H1, then it will select all headings, all H1 headings on the page. So if there are 5, 10, 20 H1 headings, all 20 H1 headings will get this style. Right? So let's say that we have text decoration underline. So this will underline our H1. And if we have another heading on the page, let me just copy it and let me paste it after our list items. So you can say this is also underlined, right? So basically the styles will work, the HTML selector will work for every instance of that element on the page. So if you are styling a list item and there are 20 items, it will apply to all 20. That's our element selector. Then we have a class selector. So remember, we already talked about this. Always remember your normal classroom reference, right? So each student has a unique ID. But multiple students can attend the same class, right? Each student can have their own ID, but more than one or multiple students can attend the same class. For example, here we have some 1,000 students in the session, right? So all 1,000 students will have a different ID on the LMS. You'll have a different ID on email, etc. But all of you can have a common class. So exactly in the exact same manner, let us say that we have several list items. Right? Let's say first, second, and third. If we have 3 list items, then we can just go ahead and we can say class equal to, and we can give a class, let's say list item. And multiple elements can have the same class. So all list items, for example, can be applied a common styling with the help of these classes. This is our class selector. So here again, if I use dot, this is for classes. So dot list item will target all classes with the name list item or with the value list item. And let us just say that we have some color change. So let's change the color to red, right? So now if I go back to my screen, you can see these three list items are red and new list items will not get that style, right? So if I add a new item, it will not get that style. Why? Because we haven't applied the class to it yet. So to apply the class through JavaScript, we can use there are two ways to go about it. The first is we can add an attribute manually. So for example, we can say new item that needs to be done before it is added to the screen. So here, so we can say new item dot set attribute. Okay, we can provide class and then comma its value. So that's going to be list item. So this will add the class now. So if I add a new item, you can see now this is also red. So this is one way of adding a new class, or adding class to a new item. But a better way to do it is to use class list. So there is something called new item dot class list. Okay. And to this list, we can add whatever we want. So this will keep existing classes and add more. So again, we can add list item like this, and then again, it will work fine. So you can see it is still red. So the class is getting applied in this approach as well. So typically, if you're looking to add multiple classes, you will go for a class list. And if you only have a single class, then you can go for set attribute. Okay. Either way, that is our class selector. It is a dot. We have to use the dot. Then we have our ID selector. Now in this ID selector, we know that only one ID can exist on a page, in the sense that like no two elements can have the same ID. Each element can have its unique ID. That's the setting, right? So we can use hash followed by the ID to get this done. So for example, the input field has an ID called task. So we can target it with its ID using hash. And then we can, let's say, change the background color to pink. So the input field's background color, if you notice now, is pink in color, right? So this is the fourth selector, our ID selector. These are four standard selectors or four simple selectors. We also have more complicated selectors. Again, one by one, we'll get there. But for now, these are the four fundamental selectors, right? Now, let me also show you a couple of different properties. So I'll show you the output and we'll just try to match it, in terms of the styling. So first up, let us go for background color. So it's a dark green kind of a shade, and we can apply this to our body. So we can say body because everything is in that color. So background color green. Now, if you're struggling with choosing the color shade, all you have to do is just take your mouse on the box where you see the color, which is right here. As soon as you do this, you will get a color picker here and you can choose the background that you want. Just hover it, like take the cursor over there and leave it. It will automatically change the values and you will get the output that you're looking for. You can see we have got a dark green background. It is very like more or less the same. So I'll leave it to this. Perfect. Now the next thing is the heading. This heading is a different font and it is cream color, right? Cream in color. So let's try to do that. So this is going to be H1. I'm going to remove the underline. There is a color property in CSS. This will be the foreground color or the color of the text. So this is beige. The color that we are looking for is either beige or bisque. So they are very similar shades. You can choose one of them. And now if you notice our heading, it should resemble, again, it does resemble the color mostly. So I will leave it to that. Okay. Again, what you can, this is zoomed in. So if you see the actual version, this is the actual size zoomed out. I'm just zooming in so that we can see everything better. Okay, perfect. So this is done. Now we've also seen how to add a custom font to it with font family. Then the next thing is here in this input field, we are actually not able to see the entire text. So we want to increase its width. Okay. And then we also want to add rounded borders and all of that. Let's do it one by one. So first up, to increase the width, we have to target the input field that is available to us here with our ID. So here we can say width is equal to, the default value is 100. So it is already at 100 right now. We can call it 150%. So this will make it 50% wider. You can see this is now stretching the entire screen. So it's taking up 150% of the screen. So we can change it to some 40%. And you can see this is still too big for us. So let's make it 30%. And again, still too big, maybe 25%. And this works. So again, if you see the output, it's a little beyond the text, a little beyond the text. We have done that something similar. Okay. Again, if you want custom control for this, you can provide a value in pixels. You can provide a value in pixels. So pixel is basically a dot on the screen. Whenever we discuss screens, we discuss resolution. And we say that our monitor is say 1280 by 720 pixels. Or we say that your smartphone is so and so pixels, pixels per inch, PPI, the density of pixels. The more the number of pixels, the better the display quality, right? So a pixel is basically one dot on the screen, which we can see. So standard pixel size is 1920 by 1080. Okay, 1920 pixels horizontally. This is a standard laptop size by 1080 pixels height wise vertically. So 1920 wide and 1080 high. This is the standard size for today's laptops. Again, mobile phones have a different thing and tablets have a different size. For most 13-inch, 12-inch laptops, 14-inch laptops, this is the standard size. Right? Now, we can specify that in pixels also. So we can say 200 pixels, which means occupy 200 dots on the my screen. Now, both of these values will differ. So even if you use percentage, my output and your output could look different because I have a 16-inch monitor. So I have a bigger screen. You might have a 14-inch display, which is a smaller screen. So the spacing could be a little different, but that is the whole point. We want to customize it or we want to make it so flexible that it looks good on all display sizes, right? So that's how we can add the value. Again, I can increase it to say 300 and I think that should be good. It's still not bigger than the list here. So let me add maybe another 100 pixels to it. Okay, this works fine. Or we can also make it 500 and it's a done deal. So 500 pixels looks good. Now, the next style that we want in our output is we want to make the corners rounded. So for this, we have something called border radius. There's a style available called border radius, and we can specify how much curve we want. Again, this is in pixels. So if I put 20 pixels now, you will see that the borders are actually curved now and they are 20 pixels. But I think this is too much. In our case, we don't want so much of a curve. We want a slightly lesser curve. So maybe I can change it to 10 pixels. Okay. So I've changed it to 10 pixels. And now if I go back to my output, you can see. So remember to save your file. You can see there are a little less curve. You can reduce it further, maybe to 5 pixels, and it will keep reducing the curve as you can see. You can keep it the exact number that you want and experiment with it. Now, the next thing that we want to do is to change the background color. It should be the same as the body color. There are two ways to do it. Since we have applied the background color to the entire body, we can just give this one a background color of transparent. So this way, the body's color will be visible. As you can see, it becomes a transparent background and the body background becomes visible. Or we can explicitly also, like we can explicitly give it the same color. So instead of saying transparent, I can copy the same color and I can paste it. Same thing, it will not matter the output in either way. Okay, so this is the setup, right? I'll go with transparent. This is a better approach. It doesn't make sense to put the same color on two elements. So this approach is better. Now, the next thing is the border itself. So for border, we have a couple of different things. First, we have to specify the border size or border width, which is how thick the border should be. We want a pretty thin one, so we can go for 2 pixels. Then we can specify the color of the border. This again is the bisque shade that we have already used. And then we have to provide the style of the border. So we have border style and there are different approaches. For example, we have a dotted border. You can see this is dotted. Then we have a dashed border. So this is dashed. right? This is dashed. You can see these, there are no dots here, but smaller lines. And then we have a solid border, which is the most common one. We typically use the solid one. I think this is still too big, so I'll change it to 1 pixels. And now you can see we are resembling the output quite a lot. We are getting there step by step. So we are background color is done, heading is done, input is done. We can apply the same styles to the button as well. So that is our input field, and that is add. So we can add an ID here, add button. Okay. And we can then pass in the same IDs to both. So we can just put a comma and add multiple selectors this way. I will also change the color to white so that if we type something in, it is white. Okay. So you can see here, I am typing it now. It is white in color. This looks better. Now you can see the effect. We have applied the common style. So the width is also getting applied, right? So in that case, what we can do is we can just override that one style which is causing a problem. So we can just take the width and remove it. We can call it um, default. You can use the default keyword. So this will give the button. Again, you can see it's not working in this case. So we can then give it a custom width like say 50 pixels, or we can call it 100%, whatever it is, right? Whatever you want to work with. So 100% is taking up 100% of the screen. So let's go for 100 pixels instead. So this is all a trial and error. You have to experiment until you get it right. Maybe 70 pixel looks good. I think 50 should do it. So again, you can see this looks really almost there. Then we have some space between this. So this space between the content and the border is known as padding. Okay. So we call it padding in CSS. So we can add some padding to it. Let's call it 20 pixels padding. And that should then add the required space. It's a lot of space. So maybe reduce it to 10 pixels. And you can see now this is exactly matching our style. I think the curve is a little more, but other than that, everything is exactly the same. So I'll go for 10 pixels here. And you can now see that our to-do list part, at least our heading and our input looks good. Okay. So the only difference is the color, which is fine, placeholder. So this is basically not a placeholder, but a value, but this works fine. Instead of white, we can probably keep it bisque. So it will resemble the rest of the page, right? So this is a little bit of CSS that we have done. And now the challenge for you is to try to style the list items. So we are not worried about the edit, completed, delete for now, but I do want to style this border. It will be very simple. It will just take 2-3 minutes for you, right? So in the chat, let me know what will be the code to create this this border around the list item. What will be the code to create this orangish border around the list item? It's a common style for all list items. So we just have to write it once. So I'll give it 2 minutes. In the chat, you can quickly try to do it. Okay, perfect. So it's exactly the same thing. I can just copy these three things, right? Maybe the padding also. But first, what we want is we want access to this one, access to that list item. And we already have it in this class. So I will remove the color red. That is not needed. It will be bisque. So we can change the color to bisque, the text color. Then the border width will be 1 pixel. The border color will change to a little orangish kind of a thing, and then border type will be solid. Perfect. Let's check our output. You can see now it does resemble it, but again, the width is too much. So we can reduce the width to say 200 pixels or something like that. Okay. And then we want to add the border radius. along with our padding. Just add those things and check. And again, you can see they look more or less the same. Of course, since we have numbers, we can remove that as well. So that's to remove the numbers, we have to style the list. So we can style the unordered list and we can say list style none. This will remove the uh, interesting. Oh, it's an ordered list. It's not a UL, but an OL. So that's my bad. So we can just change the list style to none. You can see the numbers are gone. And now it looks exactly the same. Of course, we can move it around to make it in one row, but we have not seen that yet. So that will come in later. But we can move it around a little bit so that we can see them in a single line. So basically for this, we have to change the margin to move it a little to the left. But again, we'll work with that later on, right? So that's the setup and we can add a little space between them. That will again be the margin. So I can just say margin 10 pixel to the list item. So this will create some space between them, as you can see. And we have completed our task. It's more or less looking the same. You can see here the expected result and the final result. It's more or less the same. Of course, we have 3 more buttons here, which is fine. We'll create that in the next one because we want to send those status things to the database. Now, that's basically what we are looking at. Right? That's practically everything that we wanted to discuss. But there are a couple of small fixes that we must do. Okay? And the first is that when I hover over the add button, the user should be able to see a mouse cursor. Right? It's not good to just show nothing on the button. The user should know that this is clickable. Okay. So for that, we have something called cursor. There's a style called cursor pointer. So to the add button, I can add a cursor and change it to pointer. So this way, whenever you hover over the cursor, whenever you take your mouse over the button now, you will notice it becomes this hand style click thing, right? So you can see this click. So this is how it is. Right? This is the style that we have just added. So that's our tiny fixes. And probably we might also want to maybe change the background color to tell the user that they are on the button now. So for this, we can have hash add button colon hover, just like the heading hover I showed you. So on hover, we want to do 2 things, change the cursor to pointer and also change the background color to, let's say, uh, maybe the bisque shade. And we want to change the color to the green shade. So I will take the color from here. So this is effectively just reversing the colors just so that you can see this effect. And you can see this effect when you hover over it. This looks really nice because the user will immediately understand that, okay, this is where you have to click. When you are browsing over it randomly and it gets highlighted like this, then it means that you can click here, basically. So this is the kind of styling that we typically do. This is the kind of detailing rather that we typically perform in order to like make user experiences better. It's not about just getting it the output, but also about doing these smaller additional things to make sure that the user experience is not lost. The user is not frustrated with the experience, right? So that's the setup that we have. Okay, so that's what we have in terms of the to-do list bit. Of course, like I said, we will work with the edit, delete functionalities later on. For now, we have seen how to read the input from the user and display it on the screen along with a bunch of CSS. Now, next up, listen very carefully. So we have about 10-15 minutes. What I want to quickly discuss with you are 2 things. Number one, I am not sure if you have already submitted the first assignment, but you haven't, please do. Don't keep everything for later. So even though the deadline is not gone yet, it will technically be till the end of the course or end of the internship. But I would really recommend that you try to finish off the first assignment if you haven't done already. Okay, so try to finish it off as soon as you can. Number two, you will get your next assignment today. So expect one assignment every week or so. So the next assignment will be shared with you by tonight. This assignment is going to be something similar to what we have created here, right? But a little more challenging for you. You will not need anything outside of what we have written. Okay. So like 90% of the code that we have written will be sufficient to build the assignment. Maybe 5-10% some styling things, maybe some HTML, you'll have to do a little bit of research. But other than that, about 90% of the code will be what we have written today. Okay. So that's the setup. The assignment is going to be a CRM related assignment. So a CRM stands for a customer relationship module, right? So basically what you need to do is you have to read the customer's interest, like which event are you interested in, something like that. And you have to basically add it to different lists. So there are going to be three lists, like event one, event two, and event three. The customer will get a drop down to pick one event. So whichever event the customer will pick, their name should get added to that corresponding event. So that's your task. Okay, that's your assignment. So instead of one input field, you will have two input fields. One will be the name of the customer, and one will be which event do you want to attend. There are three specific options, and then each basically like a participant list or an attendance list. That's what you have to create. Right? So again, the description will be sent to you by the team. You will get that on the hackathon only, in the hackathon interface only. You have to do it on the LMS itself. Okay. Okay. And for people who now have doubts, please put your doubts in the chat. I will help you with it. And in the meanwhile that you are asking doubts, I will just take 1 minute, to quickly add this code to GitHub right away so that I can share it with you right now. Okay, so just give me 1 minute. In the meanwhile, you can post your questions in the chat, and I'm just uploading the code on GitHub. All right. So I have put the GitHub repository link in the chat as well. Please take it from there. And basically in the repository, I have added two more folders. That's session 4 and 6. So session 4 contains the code from the previous session, the creation and fetching code. And then today's code is in session 6. Again, don't worry about session 5. It's just a number thing. We'll have an additional session if needed towards the end, right? I'll also add the recordings a bit later after the session is done. I'll add session 4 and 6 recordings here as well. Okay. So the link is in the chat. Please make sure you take it from there. If you are unable to copy the link, please click on it. It will open in your phone, in your browser. Copy it from there. Okay. So in case you are not able to copy it from uh, the chat, just click on the link. It should open up in your browser and you can take it from there. Okay. Now on to your questions. So there are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me take them up one by one. Node.js installation. So Madhurima, it's very basic actually. You just have to go to nodejs.org and follow the steps there. It's if you are on a Windows machine, they'll give you an MSI file and that will directly be like an exe setup. So just next, and it will be installed. GitHub is already shared. Uh, Yes, ideally, yes. So the question is, can we write all assignments at a time at last? So the answer is yes, but I would not suggest that. Why? Because if you do it right now, you will understand what questions you have or what concepts are not clear. Because assignments are going to be based on everything that we're discussing on a weekly basis, right? So if you do the assignment within the week, it will be clear to you what is not clear, and you can ask me in the next session as opposed to you then trying to do the assignments all together, and then it will be useless. You will try to reach out to me for a topic we talked about 2 weeks ago, and it will not make a lot of sense. So I would recommend that you try to solve the assignments as we go along and not wait for all of them towards the end. Okay. Okay. Now there's one question about learning the basics. So there are two documentation places that you can go to. One of them is MDN, and then there's W3 schools. So you can search for a particular tag over there, look for what you want to do, just Google it, and these two things will be the first to show up. I don't recommend you reading it end to end, but as in when you go along, whatever you need, you can try to basically explore that much. That's enough. You don't have to sit and read through it page to page, because you will not use more than 20-25 HTML tags. You will not use more than 20-25 CSS styles, and there are hundreds of styles and about 100 HTML tags. So you don't really have to go through all of it. Just look for things when you need them and learn as you go. Don't spend time reading everything. You will not remember it. So that's why I don't recommend that approach. So Anusha, again, if you're not getting OTP, any other LMS related issues, whatever it is, please contact the support team. I really can't help you with any LMS questions. I can only help you with technical doubts, if there are any. We have already shared the support number with you. We have also shared the support email with you. So please try to use that. The attendance link will be shared in some time. So don't worry about that. In 5 minutes or so, it will be shared in the chat. If it is your first session, or anybody, if it is your first session, the recordings of the previous sessions are available on GitHub. So please go through the recordings. You can see the recordings links here. I've already added those links. So you can just go through those and then, let me know if you need any help in the next one. So you will have to go through the recordings first for me to be able to help you. Again, I will put the repository link in the chat. So please just, refer to this. Uh, for people who are asking how to access the code from the repository, so there are two ways to do it. Let me show them to you one by one. The first way is to just open the code file that you want. So for example, if I'm looking at session 2 HTML, I can just open the folder, click on the file, and I can copy the code from here. I can also download the file from this right hand side. You can see there is this button called download raw file. Hold on one second. Yes. So there is this button, download raw file. You can click on it. This is a file by file basis. So you can download all the files from there one by one. If you want to download everything in one go, then you can click on this green code button. So as soon as you open the link, you have this green code button. Just click on this and click on download zip. So this will give you a zip file which will contain everything. So all the entire repository will be downloaded directly. Okay. So depending on how you want to approach it, if you are looking for a particular piece of code, you can download the files individually. If you're looking at downloading everything together, you can click on the code button and download zip. So this is how you access the code. Okay. Perfect. So I think those are all the questions as such. The assignments will be shared in the Telegram groups. They will be sent to you over your email. It will basically be a link to the LMS hackathon. So you just have to open the link. It will open in the LMS. You have to log into the LMS and submit the assignment there. Make sure you submit all the files properly, like HTML file, CSS file, JavaScript file. Everything should be uploaded properly. So expect the assignment tomorrow, maybe by tonight or tomorrow, because the emails will be sent out. So you will receive them either by tonight or by tomorrow morning. So yes, that's the update on the assignment. And yeah, that's basically everything that we have as such. Yes, so for people who are saying that they got 0 marks in the assignment and all, so that's actually intentional. because the assignments, like I told you in the previous session also, the assignment checking is not automated. Okay, so it will just be a submission for you. We cannot automatically check your code because different people use different approaches. So it's not possible to check the code like that. So the submission is going to show you zero always. And when the assignments will be manually evaluated, then the score will be updated. So when you submit the assignment, you will receive a zero. That's fine because it is how it is supposed to be. But when the assignment will be manually evaluated, then you will get the score. So don't worry if you are seeing a zero. Make sure you have uploaded the code properly. That is important because if the code is missing or if the code is not working, then you will get zero. Okay. But if your code is working fine and you have uploaded it, submitted it carefully, then you will get uh, the proper marks. Okay. So that's the idea. For the LMS issues, I have already told you that you have the email ID, the support email ID. That is, I think, IIDT-student support at something. I will ask the team to reshare that to you on the Telegram group. So you can email over there. And there is also a WhatsApp only number. So you can also consult on WhatsApp as well. So either way, you can reach out to the team. Somebody will, help you out. So you'll have to give 2 to 3 days for the team to fix your issues because we get a lot of concerns. So it takes some time to answer them. So don't worry about if you've not received the response immediately. Within 2 to 3 days, you will receive it. Okay. Again, yes, it is important to get marks in the assignment. Again, if you have attended the introductory session, it was very clearly mentioned. The marking scheme was told to you, which weightage is how much, everything was told to you. So I think there is some 20% weightage for assignments. So out of the 100 score that you will get, 20% is from the assignments, right? There is 30% in the final project and 20% for live session. So there is a score for everything, as you might already know. Again, you can watch the recording of that session for more, but we have already given you clarity on the scoring, how much weightage is there for assignment, how much weightage is there for attending live sessions. Everything has some weightage. It's already been shared with you. Okay. So yes, it is important that your assignment scores should be good. Otherwise, you will lose out on that 20% that you will get by submitting the assignments. Okay. All right. So for downloading the code, it's very simple. You just have to click on this code button. There's only one button in green and click on download zip. That's it. So this will download everything on your system. It will take everything from the repository, all folders and files, everything, and download it to you. Very simple. Click on the code button and download zip. If you want to download individual files, let us say you only want today's code or yesterday's code. So you can open up the folder and then click on an individual file. And then you will get the download button here. There's a download raw file button. You can click on that or you can also copy the code directly. Either way, it will work. So you can click on this button. This will download the file for you. You can see it downloads the file. Okay. So these are the 2 different ways. You can either download individual files or download the entire repository in one go. Okay. So the assignments will be shared with you on email. Okay. So it's very important that you have access to your emails, like we have mentioned several times. So you will get an email because each assignment is mapped to you. We need to track who is clicking on that assignment, right? So when you click on that email, you will be redirected to the LMS, and that's how it will work. Okay, done. So that's the setup, and that's what we have for today. The next session will be the same schedule will be followed next week as well. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 to 7. So we'll meet on Monday next, and we'll continue our discussion. We'll move to databases and backend for the next 2 to 3 sessions, and then we'll make the project by putting everything together. Okay. So that's the plan for the next couple of sessions. I have shared the GitHub code with you. The attendance link has also been shared in the chat several times. So if you guys stop spamming the chat, you will get it. If you keep spamming the chat, you will not be able to get the attendance link. It's already shared 4 or 5 times in the chat. Okay. I am asking the team to share it again now. So they'll just send it again. please don't spam in the chat so that you can see the link. Okay? So they are sharing the attendance link again. Just a minute. Make sure you fill the feedback form. And that's the link that is shared. So the feedback form is the same as the attendance, right? Once you fill the feedback form only, you will get the attendance. So make sure you fill the feedback carefully, mention everything that is good. If you think that there are some changes needed, mention those. And yeah, so again, the attendance link is now in the chat. Make sure you fill that in. And yes, that's it for this one. Thank you so much, guys, for attending. Let's continue in the next one. So yes, have a great weekend, you guys. See you guys on Monday. Bye-bye.